Good morning, everyone, and welcome to University Unitarian Church in Seattle, Washington. My name is John Luopa. I'm here with my colleague Beth Chronister, together with our pianist Dwight Beckmeyer, to provide this service, share this service with you this morning. We think of you often, and we hope that you are all well, and we remind you if there is anything that we may do to help or assist you, please be in touch with one of the staff members or the care team members. As I mentioned in our Gateway newsletter last week, we have decided to keep the building closed during the month of May. Originally, we were hoping to open it up sooner, but given the governor's recommendations to us and other health officials, it is wisest for us to continue to keep the building closed and to offer all of our programming virtually as we have been doing for the last few months. We will monitor the situation carefully and keep you informed. I know we are all eager to be back together again someday soon and want to make sure when we do that it will be a wise decision and that it will help us and not hurt us. Let us begin the service this morning with our prelude.
I call us to worship this morning with these words from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Give up the fight for some other moment, some other life than here and now. Give up the longing for some other world, the wishing for other choices to make, other songs to sing, other bodies, other ages, other countries, other stakes. Purge the past and forgive the future, for each come too soon. Surrender only to this life, this day, this hour, not because it does not constantly break your heart, but because it also beckons with beauty, startles with delight. If only we keep waking up, this is the gift we have been given. These body clothes, this heartbreak, this pulse, this breath, this light, these friends, this hope. Here we remember ourselves, all a part of it, giving thanks together. Come, let us worship. Welcome to University Unitarian Church. Welcome to worship on this day. From wherever you are, would you please join together in singing our doxology?
Friends, as most of you know, we have been engaged in the last month in our annual giving campaign, and that is near to a close, at least one phase of it. And we have been featuring on the last several Sundays, and again today, a member family who would like to share with you what University Unitarian Church means to them. Before we do that, I would like to thank, however, Katie Rentschler and Laura Pepping, who are the co-chairs of this year's campaign, who several months ago stepped forward to help us with an online giving program which you have been participating in these last several weeks. For those of you who have pledged already for next year, I thank you for your generosity in supporting the ministries and mission of the congregation. If you've not yet had a chance to do that, I hope that you will do it very soon, as we would like to wind things down in the next week or two. You will be hearing from Katie and Laura next week, but today we look forward to hearing from the Almeida Ferguson family.
I love UUC because it's a family. For me, growing up in the National Park Service, moving from place to place, we always found a church home wherever we landed. And UUC has been the church home here for us, and I am so grateful for it.
UUC has been a wonderful place to go to nurture my spirit, my joy, my happiness.
I love that church school spends time with Toby as he is, meets him where he is, and enriches him in such a glorious way that he wants to always go back for more.
Is that this fun going deal?
I love how our church shows up in the world. working at Harborview Medical Center and the VA, I run into colleagues in the hallways and on the bus. I know how many of us show up, whether it's in a protest or showing up for nonprofits and different communities that ask for assistance, and we're willing to give it. I love how our UU principles and our values call us to sometimes make hard choices and sometimes sacrifice so that we believe in a better tomorrow.
One of my favorite things is watching how our children grow in the church and how they express themselves. And I just cannot wait to see more of these amazing people become even more amazing adults.
UUC has been an amazing part of our family's spiritual resilience. We look forward to going to church every Sunday and being able to see people we haven't seen during the week and hear messages that challenge us, that expand us, that make me laugh and cry, and just gives us hope.
I love you. I miss you. I really could use some hugs right now. And I hope to see you really soon.
Just want to say that we miss you, and we can't wait to see everybody when all of this is said and done. Of course, as Unitarian Universalists, we know that it's never truly said and done. However, I can't wait until we're back together again. And so, I ask, give generously, give what you can in time or in resources, because we believe that this world is optimistic, and we believe this world is about abundance, and so we give out of our abundance. That's what we believe in. That's what we believe our principles have called us to. And so we're looking forward to being back together again. Thank you for being a part of who and what we love. What do you want to say to our UUC church?
Sorry, I'm on the wall.
Friends, I invite you now to join in singing "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple," our opening hymn. This is the time in our service, friends, when we share out of that abundance that Justin was talking about and that sweet video that he and his family shared with us. And we say customarily each week some words, as we have for many decades here at University Unitarian Church. I invite you to join me in saying them now. This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it.
As I mentioned a few weeks ago, throughout this quarantine time, I have been walking almost daily to the Meadowbrook Pond near my home to go and to listen to nature and become watchful of what is happening in that particular beautiful place. And so this morning, I offer you this meditation from Meadowbrook Pond. If you'd please join me now in taking a breath together. And settling into this moment. Welcoming it as it is. The pond was brimming, following the recent rains, a cathedral of bird songs in the middle of a now subdued city. High up in the air, blue herons rest, fold their long legs into meticulously made nests, their necks curled, tending to their young. From the ground, it is possible to hear their wings flap. A bald eagle watches nearby, waiting for her opportunity to hunt. Suddenly lands in the same tree, the herons start screeching, feathers extended they hiss. It is a risk to hope, to love, to create new life. A risk to put faith in this uncertain and sometimes cruel world. So much can be taken away in one swoop. High in the air, life teaches uncomfortable and astounding lessons. That for life to flourish, we must prioritize it over ourselves at times. That we must love courageously. That birth, life, and death are inextricably linked, bound together in an awesome and awful dance. And that death, too, is a wise and elegant teacher. High in the air, the threat has subsided. The eagle driven away unsatisfied. The herons begin building their nest once more as the pond ripples with the kiss of the wind. To these words, I invite you to add the silent prayers and intentions of your own hearts. Blessed be, and amen.
Friends, I'd like to begin this morning with a philosophical sentence. So I'll repeat it to you twice, and then in the time that I have remaining to me, I'll hope to make it clearer to all of us, including myself. Here it is. All organic life, all life, depends upon the necessity of controlling its response to the environment in order that the environment may serve its own purposes. All life depends upon the necessity of controlling its response to its environment in order that the environment may meet its own purposes. And we know from biology and history that those species, those persons, animals, plants, which are able to control their response to their environment, flourish. And it's much more obvious for us, perhaps, when we think about human beings, creatures like yourself and like myself, because as we are led to believe in our culture, human beings, theoretically anyway, are given the superior position in the world above all other life forms, meaning that the world is ours to the extent that we know how to control it. Some scriptures, which many of us were schooled in from a very early age, said that human beings were given dominion over the earth. That meant control over the earth, and that no other species was to be accounted for in that plan, but only human beings, you see. And children learn this from infancy on. A cry becomes a signal, eliciting a response from a caregiver. And toys become symbols of controlling the environment, perhaps even beyond a child's control. And if you've ever lived with teenagers, control is an existential issue, whether in the form of pulling rank or their stretching the elasticity of the boundaries, as they should, you see. And so from early childhood on, all of us come to learn that to the degree that each of us manages our environment, we become what we call a person. We become an I, a subject, controlling objects, however simple, which is living and moving. And we must become a person because a person is a being who has some control over his or her life. We are not just objects to be pushed around, you see. We have to be able to manage. One of the greatest fears, just about all of us have, I have it, certainly is that we will lose control at the wrong moment, either mentally or physically. Because if we were to lose control, certainly as we age, we believe that we would become less a person. And so much of our life is spent trying to control everything around us, ourselves, and other people. Or we might go to the other extreme when there is entirely too much control. And this is one of the basic perennial problems for every person and every group and everyone we have ever known. Too much control, we know, may be destructive. Just imagine, if you will, and only briefly, the current president of the United States has enormous control over our fates, over our future. And the destructive consequences of that control are evident to all of us because the control is based on delusion and deceit. And while it may appear to give some groups or persons freedom, it often destroys the freedom of others, the ability of others to have some control over their own lives, you see. And so the enormous complications of this challenge of how much control ought we have, how little, has been a universal problem as long as human beings have had consciousness. No one can ever live without facing this problem, and no group has ever flourished without facing the challenge and finding some way to deal with it. No matter when or where or how you live, you have the problem of knowing how much control should I exercise in this situation? When do I have too much control? When do I have too little control? And what do I need to do to get more or to give up some of the control I already have? Now, religion has become a concentrated example of this struggle with control. This is the very reason why some people hate religion, because it exercises too much control over individuals. And this is also the same reason why many millions and millions of people love religion, because it plays a dominant, instructive force of control in that individual's thinking and in that individual's being. I would say that it is so much a part of the heart of religion as anything else you can imagine, this issue of control. And the kinds of control, most of the religion, actually the kinds of religion most of us have been exposed to, declare that only certain people should have control. And it is tragically so that in just about all the religions of the world, and even all the great philosophies of the world, it's usually men, and white men in particular, who ought to have control in that religious practice. Often clergy, like myself, because the average person should not have very much control, and that we do not and cannot really have any kind of control in our lives, because that would be reserved for what some people would call God, or other people would call karma, or destiny, or fate, or their astrological chart. It is projected onto some entity beyond oneself as the source of control of my own life. So if the essence of control is any one of those things, God or karma, you may plead with it. You may try to align your life in faithfulness to it. You may gain favor, but do not ever suppose for one moment that you are going to manage your own life. So pervasive is this cast of thinking that many would claim that it is impossible to dispense with religion or God in some form, because if we did, we would have to think and judge for ourselves. And clearly, we are not capable of doing that well. So the story goes. I remember a couple of years ago now, I had a visitor one Sunday morning assault me with a question as she was leaving the sanctuary. She asked, Reverend, where do you get the authority to say what you said this morning? Well, from my own intelligence and experience, I replied, and from what I have been able to absorb from wiser and deeper minds and hearts than my own. That explains it, she said. Explains what? I inquired. That explains how misguided you are. You're just on your own. And she stomped out of the building. And I said to myself, that's it exactly. That's true. And that is the beauty and the magic of it. And I smiled to myself. So, how might we deal with this problem of control? How might religion deal with it differently than it has for so long? I have a couple of suggestions for your consideration, of course. And it begins with this, that we must today, as in the most primitive of times, recognize that control is a paramount human problem, that we can never get away from its demands, from the wonderment of it, from the questioning of it, from the necessity of it, and that anything that concerns us in our life has got to deal with this challenge of control. That's number one. Control is essential, and it is elusive. It is never at any point completely solvable. And my second point is that I think that religion ought to recognize that religion has no exclusive authority in this area. And I understand by making such a statement that I would be considered heretical or foolish by many, many millions of people. But I do believe that religion has no right to dominate or control or command us. We must assume the importance of control, and we must reject the attempt of any individual or any group to impose arbitrary rules upon us, to demand obedience in the name of anything other than our own self-development as it is balanced against the needs of the community. And that relationship is absolutely critical, because without it, we would have no meaningful life. We have the challenge of trying to understand what kinds of controls each of us needs in our own living, aging, developing, and they must always be balanced by the relationships we have with other people, with other groups, our society, our culture, our country, whatever, always. So the individual is not alone in this, but is yoked to the needs of a specific community. Religion, then, should rest on our assent as self-governing persons who willingly and wisely embrace the needs of community or the common good, and if needed, to subsume ourselves in favor of the welfare of the community. Another way of saying this might be that religion must put upon every one of us the responsibility for deciding for ourselves which controls are best for us, should be, must be, as they are balanced against sustaining community. And I must say that our Unitarian Universalist religion, for nearly 2 centuries, has primarily stressed the first part of that equation and not the second part of it, that religion should only be about the development of the individual person above all other things that may have worked 250 years ago after the Enlightenment, but it has not worked for a very long time. And the future of the world and our own well-being and the future of life on earth depends now on a relationship between thoughtful, sensitive, individual persons in concert with needs of the community, you see. This is an enormous challenge for us, and it has no obvious or easy solution. It cannot be resolved with simple cliche or statement or arrogation of authority, of control or power. How do we decide then for ourselves? How do we choose that to which we give our assent? What kinds of control might we have, in fact, do have? Is there a standard or a guideline for control? I think there could be. And that is my third point this morning. I'm going to embrace the courage of risk by suggesting, hopefully, something that's not maddeningly simple, nor simplistic. But I think that the norm for control could and should be creativity. We should favor only that kind of control that fosters creativity. That is the ability to transcend traditional or tested ways of thought in order to create a new and meaningful way of thinking or behaving. Creativity should be the guideline for control. For you see, whatever contributes to the growth in the quality and depth of our relationships with each other and with the world is a good in a philosophical sense. And whatever control is necessary to achieve that kind of opportunity for the maximum fulfillment of life is a good. And any kind of control that interferes or diminishes that kind of growth or relationship is not good and may even be evil. How creative am I allowed, encouraged, willing to be in my situation? That tells you how much control you have or might have. And whatever kind of control I have should be governed by creativity. Only that will enhance my life and the life of others. Otherwise, I will be unable to respond to changing conditions. And because the conditions of our lives continue to change, the capacity to be creative in our response to them is the difference between subsisting and flourishing. Control, then, is not the limiting of my options, but the opening of ways in which an individual might discover multiple remedies. Now, I know you want an example of this, and I'm going to suggest one. And I want to say, by way of preface, though, that every illustration is limited. Every illustration is more convincing to some than to others, but that is no reason not to offer one. But I think it is one that most of you are familiar with, and it's one that we hold up regularly because we are fortunate enough to live in the kind of world where there are exceptional human beings who are able to do a new thing, to make a lasting impact on the quality of life, and even after their deaths have so inspired other people that others carry on the message and the method of those persons. And so the person I want to suggest to us this morning is Martin Luther King Jr. Whatever control King had over his own life and the plight of his community had to be creative. He had to creatively use what control he had, and he had to hone an ability to exploit tension creatively. This is something that a good coach knows. A winning coach knows this. You play to the greatest capabilities and capacities of your team. And King understood that if there was going to be any kind of further advance, he was going to need to exploit the social and racial and even religious tensions that existed all around him. And one of his singular achievements was the promotion of the nonviolent resistance to injustice. His specific task with this one, though, was to make nonviolent direct action respectable in white eyes. That was the singular challenge, you see. His anger, which was legitimate and justified and very deep, and his critique, which was sensitive, intelligent, and highly moral, had to be respectable in white eyes, or there would be no further movement. And his creative oratory worked powerfully on white guilt. There were hundreds of thousands of people in the 60s who followed Dr. King, many out of a sense of guilt. I'm not sure guilt is always the best thing to force social change around, because once some gains are made, the guilt resides and the followers disappear. In the 1960s and 70s, our Unitarian Universalist churches were packed with people. But as soon as we resolved the Vietnam War and the racial issues of the time, those people left, you see. But King was intelligent enough to know that if there were going to be any gains, even limited gains, he would have to appeal to the dominant white culture. And so he was able in his person to combine righteousness and respectability. And that was the secret of his success in achieving gains for African Americans in this country, and by opening up the struggle for racial and economic justice to others who would carry on after him, long after him, even to these days itself. You see, he was able to be creative in his control of his own destiny, and he had a sense of his own destiny and what he was called to do and be in the limited years of his life. And he knew that he had the capacity to make an impact on other people. Now, you know and I know, with this whole phenomenon of creativity, creativity often exacts a price. And Dr. King knew that he would have to pay a price. Just like Jesus of Nazareth knew he would have to pay a price. That was the risk they were willing to take, because creative new solutions are often threatening to the status quo. And while creative new solutions often do great good, they often have within them the seeds of harm. And that insight speaks to the tragic nature of human existence. Sometimes our greatest goods have the elements in them of our own downfall. Advances that we make in science and in government may be misused to do tremendous harm to other people. That's the tragedy of human existence, more than another sermon in itself, of course. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to be creative, because the creative advance hopefully outlasts and is deeper than the other effects. We need to find some kind of a guideline, some kind of a solution. Every person must find his or her own way through that confusion. For even at our very best, at our most clear moments, at our most sophisticated, wise points of analysis, we are still going to have some confusion about how much control we should exercise, either over ourselves or over ourselves in relationship to other people. Conditions of the world are always determinative. Situations change. We now find ourselves really at a hinge point in human culture with the arrival of a pandemic disease. We are all struggling to understand how we ought to respond to this, what its many side effects are going to be, how long it is going to last, who is going to be impacted by this, how much control we have in this situation, how can we make decisions that are going to be in the best interests of all people, of those not born, of all of life, you see. Our guide of creativity, I suggest, has to always begin as something personal and idiosyncratic, because it needs to be yours if you are going to own your responsibility in the great pageant of life. And it has to be variable because it must change from time to time, depending upon the situation and your needs. And of course, it has to be flexible. It cannot be rigid. And then that control, that creativity that we have embraced in our own control moves outside of being merely idiosyncratic when we share its meaning with other people, gain their corroboration and support, and create new meaning together on behalf of all. There is no simple solution to this enormous human problem. But in the recognition of the problem, that is, that control is essential and elusive, and in our understanding of the problem, that we must each decide how much and what kind of control each of us needs as balanced against the needs of the community, and in our relationship to it, there comes the creative possibility and the hope that we may be able, at some point in our human journey, to do without violence, and to do without force, and to do without armies and coercion, to do without the abuse of mongering fear among all, without ignorance and victimization, and that through our limited human understanding and sensitivity, and more importantly, through our courage and our faith, we will discover ourselves as something more than mere matter. Whatever glory we may achieve as a life form will come to us as sensitive spirit seeking to achieve self in relationship to others, a relationship that fosters mutual respect and affection, a relationship that inspires others, maybe even long after we are departed. Let us take much of love into all the struggles of life. And when the recall sounds and the shadows fall, as they will, may we have hearts unembittered by all we have suffered and uncorrupted by all we have enjoyed, and be at the last remembered, cherished, adored, as those who loved and trusted boldly. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is One More Step. Now, therefore, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides and good does not yet prosper, let us gather what strength we have, what confidence and valor, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world awaited be the world attained. Amen.